goals, no question is stupid. Please ask. If you have the question, most likely someone else does. And if someone's not on here and they are going to be watching the recording, they might have that question too. If you do not want to unmute and ask the question, feel free to put it in the chat. And Colleen, Jen, or Julie will be watching that chat for me. And again, I'm going to respect your time. If I see that I'm running over with time, I will stop it and we will just push some of it back till next week. And again, be engaged. Ask the questions. One quick reminder before we get started. Again, the R.A. Horn Award and the Franklin B. Walter Award are back up. Deadline to submit Tuesday, February 28th. The R.A. Horn Award is for an Outstanding Student Achievement Award. And the Franklin B. Walter is for a teacher or staff member. It could also be a team of teachers. I know last year we did have a team of teachers as well. And I believe, are we sharing out this PowerPoint so they have the links?
Yeah, so this presentation is getting posted on the website as well as the recording. It'll be there by Thursday of this week at the very latest. So you'll have the link, and actually I'll put it in the chat. Oh, never mind. Colleen is just, as I'm talking, she's already doing it. So she's getting those for you. So please submit your nominations. This is a great way to recognize all the work that's happening with students with disabilities in the region, and also teacher awards. And as Danielle said, we highly encourage teaching teams to be nominated.
All right, Colleen, are we recording so I can start? Okay, so let's get started with section 5, the transition. Again, why transition? For those of you that are completely new to this, in middle school, I'm just gonna kind of highlight these facts. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but young adolescents with disabilities are 50% more likely than their counterparts without disabilities to drop out of school. And as we plan, the more we plan, it reduces that alienation and improves attendance and decreases student dropout. That's why if anyone is familiar with indicator 1 or indicator 2, the graduation or the dropout rate, the reason we are viewing this as not just a special education, but a whole school is because the more we look at transition planning, the better, the decrease in the student dropout. And again, those critical transition skills such as career awareness and exploration, the earlier age that we start, the better it is. And this is for all students, not just students with disabilities. Also, the other reason we do it, guys, is simply it's part of Ohio's operating standards. It is beginning not later than the first IEP to be in effect when the child turns 14. This means if a student is only 13 at their IEP, however, before the next IEP is to happen, they turn 14, you must have a transition plan or you have to redo the entire IEP. Even if you have not written an IEP, if you've sat in one, if you've seen one, you know that that takes a lot of time, and having to do 2 IEPs in a year is not always fun. So if you are aware that the student is turning 14 during that IEP, please make sure to add that transition plan. With that as well, the student, once they turn 14, they now must be invited to the IEP. If they are not invited, so if they are not on that invite form, the school district is at a denial of faith is happening. So we have to make sure that we are adding the student to the IEP. Something to keep in mind, once that transition plan is a part of a student's IEP, that is the focus of it. Our goals, our SDI, everything's coming from the goals at the transition plan. What does this student want to do? So the moment the transition plan is in place, this is a focus. And this is why it is so imperative that we understand section 5. So this, I'm sure most of you are used to looking at. There's one for post-secondary training and education. There's one for employment, and there's one for independent living. So I'm going to give you just the nitty-gritty of what you need to know. I'm not going to go through every detail because you're not the ones that are always having to write it, but I want you to be aware of what is compliant as well as what is best practice. And even maybe what happens if something goes wrong in the IEP, what can you do? Before I continue, I want you to make sure that you know that schools are responsible for providing the programs and transition services. Schools are not responsible for the accomplishment of the goal. So a lot of times we become fearful. You might have a student that says, I want to be an NFL player. However, they're not on the football team. We've seen this before. We've heard this. Even if you're not an individual that works with students with disabilities often, we hear students say these goals that we're kind of like, we are not responsible for whether or not they make that happen. We are responsible for providing them every opportunity while they are with us to prepare for that. Okay, so I want to make that very clear. We are not responsible for the accomplishment of it. We are responsible for providing the programs and services. However, that is not to say that we are not responsible for having those difficult conversations. If a student says, again, I'm going to stick with I want to be an NFL player, but we're not even on a football team and we are in sophomore year of high school. Well, I'm going to have a serious conversation with my student. Well, okay, so you want to be a football player, you want to be a pro. What are all the things that we need to do in order to be a pro football player? And then we're going to go through the steps. And a lot of this is called backwards planning. If anyone's ever built anything, we have a blueprint, right? That's what we're creating with them. We are creating a blueprint with them. And that the goal is, by creating that blueprint, we are able to have that student see, is this really something that that's possible? Maybe they just want to do something with sports, but you have to have those conversations. All right, so continuing with the goals. Does anyone have any questions on that? Because that can be a sticky point where I know people want to say, I can't write that down. They want to be a brain surgeon. Where in reality, if a student wants to do that, we might have to write it down, but we might have to have that difficult conversation.
Danielle, I guess my question with that, sorry, it's Sandy. I don't have my camera on. So, a kid tells me like, yep, we'll go, I want to be in the NFL. And yes, of course, like they're not playing football, and I'll talk to them about eligibility here at high school, eligibility to play in college and all of those things. What if that's what the kid's telling me, but the parent has a completely different goal for them? How do you straddle the line there? Like, do you go with the kid's goal for this?
So as soon as, unfortunately, yes and no. So in that goal itself is a student goal. That does not mean in that plot section, you can't say that the parent would like to see. So that way it's still in the IEP. In that goal section is the student goal, and that's what we have to keep in mind. So in that case, maybe in there, it's that the student will be the NFL player, but then down below, the parent would like the student maybe to partake in sports writing, but not necessarily in the football, right? Gotcha. So we can still put what their goal is, because actually we should be getting parent input. However, in that upper box there, that is the student's goal.
Okay. And see, I've actually, I'm pretty good at meeting with the kid. I'm not so great at getting the parent thing. So I've always worried like, what if they're totally not okay with that? But if it's the kid's goal, then I have that. But I know I have to improve the input part. Okay. Thank you.
No, that's a great question. Helena, is there any in the chats before I go on? Okay. All right, some other areas that we need to make sure. And I'm really going to focus on what's in bold here. So we do not want to use plans to, or is interested, would like to. We are saying that upon graduation from high school, Joe will be, Joe will attend. Because remember, we are not responsible for whether or not that happens. We are responsible for giving them all the resources possible. This is their goal. So if they say they will do something, we're going to expect that they will do it. Other things, it has to be updated at least annually. There are times that our students, they really do know what they want to do, and there is no change. If there is no change, you must put in there a reason why there is no change. I will tell you that when they do monitoring on these IEPs, they do look at past ones and they look to see if there's growth. One of the things that I wanted to touch upon with this one, I've been in meetings in the past where a student has actually changed their mind and said, I changed my mind, I don't want to do that. That is okay. There's two things that you can do in that situation. One, This is a draft IEP. Nothing should be done before that IEP meeting. So if we have to change it, yes, is it more work? Might it make the IEP go longer? Yes. However, we can change it. Or maybe we have that conversation with the student. Well, maybe we do a little bit more research on this. And then if you're still thinking this next year, we can change it. Again, that's that difficult conversation to have. The other thing I just want to point out, we are supposed to be getting more detailed as we get older. And I put an example here, 9th grade, upon graduation from high school, Joe will attend a 4-year college or university. Notice by the time I get to 11th grade, now I'm saying what they want to do and which college they want to go to. Okay, this is just some examples of different post-secondary goals. Looking at employment now, please make sure when writing this employment goal, if you are seeing one, it has to be competitive and integrated employment. What competitive? It's working in the competitive labor market is performed on a full or part-time basis in an integrated setting. And integrated is typically found in a community. We're not supposed to be making up our own jobs for this one. And I know some people are going to say, well, what about some of our most medically fragile students? Unfortunately, there are still jobs out there. Maybe it is using a communication board in an adult setting to support, right? However, we cannot make up a job. If you are unsure of whether or not a job actually exists, especially for some of our lower students, reach out to your DOD. Reach out to some of your intervention specialists, your special ed director. They will have some creative ideas out there. The third area is independent living, and this can create some controversy as well. When we think of independent living, all too often we think of living on our own. However, there's more to just living on our own, right? There's some self-advocacy pieces. Do we have safety? Are there the daily living skills? An independent living goal should be considered if there is anywhere, and when I put this AATA data, what I'm referring to is transition assessment. So these are whether they're worksheets, whether they're Navions, whether it is an observation or an interview. So looking at any of that data, the IEP profile, the ETR, or the reevaluation, or if anywhere in the IEP, it states that there is behavior, mental health, or daily living or functional issues, there must be an independent living goal. So my question would be really, when is an independent living goal not needed? I'm going to be honest, it's few and far between. Perhaps if the student's on consult, but usually if we have an IEP, it's because something is impacting that student academically, whether it's a daily functional issue, behavior. So keep in mind, if this is anywhere in there, you must have an independent living goal. Okay, now it may not be needed if you have enough data to support that and the IEP team agrees. If you're in an IEP meeting and you see though in that independent living goal that it says not needed, not applicable, that is not enough, and you are setting that IEP up to be flagged, you can no longer state that. You have to give a reason why. Why is it not needed? They are going to be looking at this. And I can tell you right now, if anyone sat through anything that I've talked about, graduation is a huge focus of the state, which means transition is going to be a huge focus. They will be looking at this. Maybe it's a database documentation demonstrates no need, and the IEP team agrees there's no need. Anywhere you can put the documentation, make sure you put it. Questions on the goals?
I have a question myself, Danielle.
Please ask mine.
So what should I do as a building leader or even maybe as a classroom teacher in a meeting if I'm sitting there and I realize something like they don't have a life skills goal or an independent living goal or some problem with it? Or maybe I'm reviewing an IEP for one of my students and realize that it's missing something? What is my responsibility as the general educator?
Well, two parts there. Every person that's names on an IEP is responsible for that IEP, right? They are our student. It doesn't just fall on one. So if you see that something might be missing or you have questions, I think it's very fair to, if it's beforehand, maybe ask the intervention specialist, the transition specialist, about what data they have that they determine this. If you're in a meeting, it's a great discussion point. I see that we're not doing a goal for this area. Would love to hear from the student, would love to hear from the parent, the teacher. If I am the teacher, I would love to know how this was decided. Are you prepared for constructive criticism? Are we, and it's okay to throw out some living, we all know we've all had to rent a place, own a home, right? We've all had to be out there before where we can ask these questions. Colleen, I think it's any person that's at that IEP table, it's your responsibility that if you see something missing, to ask how that decision was made. Because again, I'm going to say no decision should be made before the IEP meeting. If a decision is made and there is not flexibility with change in that, again, you're setting yourself up to predetermination. Okay. In the next area, the course of study. Right now, this is probably the simplest part of this because it should only have one of two things, either Ohio Learning Standards or Ohio Learning Standards Extended. That is all that should be in this as right now. I'll tell you this potentially will be changing. We are currently looking at other states to see what they do because federally they would like more detail. But as of right now, ODE would only like to see Ohio Learning Standards or Ohio Learning Standards Extended. Yes, if you are at JVS or another, you might have that as well. But if you're in a regular four-year high school, it should be Ohio Learning Standards, Ohio Learning Standards Extended. Stay tuned though, in case that does change. All right, the number of annual goals related to transition. This looks really simple, and yet I have seen this way too many times kind of get marked. So I just want to make sure that there's an understanding. So today I'm going to talk about section 5 and 6. 5 is the transition area. Section 6 is our IEP goals. When we are asking for the number of annual goals related to the transition, I'm asking which of my section 6 goals are attached to this, because again, as soon as you have a transition plan, it is the most important part of the IEP. There is no reason if we have a reading goal for a student, that reading goal should be helping them on their transition plan, either get a job, go to school, live on their own. If there's a math goal, same thing. If there is a speech goal, any of these things. So it does not have to be all of them. Maybe a student has 4 goals and only 2 of them relate to it. That's okay. However, section 6 must match with section 5. All right, working my way a little bit backwards. I kind of talked a little bit about that AATA, that age appropriate transition assessment. What you're looking for here. So if you are the one reviewing it before, if you are in a meeting, you should be able to hear 4 really important things: the student's strengths, a student's preference, their interest, and their needs. So Colleen, going back to your question, if I was in a meeting and I'm either the administrator or I'm a gen ed teacher and I don't hear one of those, I might be, maybe I just ask, oh, hey, can we add in my class, the student really likes to, prefers to do things hands-on. Hey, my student really prefers to do stuff on the computer. Feel free to add to it at this section. Again, it is a working document. I'm assuming no questions. Sometimes I talk too fast, guys, so slow me down if need be. All right, so the next area is this transition services and activities. All right, every transition service that is on there has to relate back to that spin I just said, and that is why we have to have that. We are relating into the needs on there. Even if the service may be something the student needs to work on, if you don't have it in that area, that section, you should not have that in the transition area. It should not be an activity. The activity has to relate to what you put in that spin section. It cannot be uniform. I should not pull every 9th grader's IEP and see the same thing. Again, they must change annually unless there's data to support. There are times, just make sure you are putting this. And if you are the one documenting notes, go ahead and put this in the PRO1. Here's your, or wherever you're writing the notes for it. If all students are receiving, do not put it in the transition services. Again, this is an individualized education plan. If all students are receiving it, we don't need to put it here. And I've been asked this before, so let's say the students are going to check out EHOVI or they're going to check out JVS. All students have an opportunity to do this, but perhaps this one student, when they come back, they're going to meet one-on-one. You can go ahead and put that activity. So the counselor will meet with the student to discuss pros and cons, because not every student is getting that. And you must have at least one service for each. However, I will tell you, if it only happens one time on one date, you need to have 2. So referring to OOD services, that's a one-time thing. You need to have a second. All right. That was a lot. Frequency. You can put as many services that you would like. Here's my hint. If you see that your IS or your transition person has put down 5 activities, as the administrator, I might, if I'm reviewing this ahead of time, I might ask them, are you sure you're going to be able to get this done? Because all 5 of those activities need data. It is okay to do more than what is on this IEP, but what you put on this IEP, you must have data for. So again, try to make the services something that you're already doing naturally. Frequency is the minimum amount of time. Exactly what I just said. You can do it more, but this is the minimum that you're going to be collecting data on. And please do not have them say that you're going to do something multiple times and it should only be done one time. So if you see on there, career interest inventory, great time to say, hey, what class are they going to be taking that career interest inventory? Do they do it like spring and winter? Feel free to ask these questions. Ask to see the question. And again, if it's only done one time, we're looking for it to be done more than once. Almost through this section. Projected beginning and end dates can be the IEP dates, or if you know will be completed by a certain time, you can list that end dates. Never ever put through graduation. Projected begin date is the date of the IEP. The end date is either the end of the IEP or when you know it's going to happen. Person, agency responsible. Here's where I'm going to give a warning to all of you that are on this. Make sure you know if you're being put on there. No person or agency should be written down without knowledge of this. If someone was to write that the counselor is supposed to do this, make sure the counselor knows that they're on there, because guess who is now responsible for that? If you go and put an outside agency person, I will tell you the concern with that is now you are promising the parent that that happens. I am not saying that it won't happen, but now you are responsible for making sure an outside agency comes in and does that. That's extra work on your plate. Please make sure the person, agency responsible knows it's happening, and really it should be someone within the district. All right. Then it's going to ask for types of evidence with this. There is a couple different options, and we can put the other with a list. I'm going to give this word of advice, like I said before. If you mark more than one of them, guess what you need to be able to hand over every time that that parent asks for data? You're going to have to ask. So if I mark down, I'm going to have a work sample, a rubric, and I'm going to have anecdotal record, I'm going to be expected to have all that. legally, I have said, I am going to do this. So again, it is a team, although an intervention specialist is usually the one writing this. Sometimes it's a transition coordinator. This is a team approach. If your name's on this, you are responsible for this as well. The student is all of our students. We want to make sure that we are not overdoing this. All right, questions on this section so far? All right, this last area, this target date for child to graduate. Typically the June of the year they are graduating. I will let you know that even if you think a student's going to be going 5 years, 6 years, you need to keep it the cohort that they are to graduate until that final IEP. Then you can change it. The reason being is the goal is always to have our students graduate with their cohort. Our students are general education students first. So it is the June of their cohort year. We do not change it into that final IEP if they are staying longer. When you do get this PowerPoint, there is a link if you're interested in the specific questions and how they go through to make sure that this is compliant. Just wanted to add that so that you guys have it. All right, before I move on, that was a lot of slides and a lot of information because again, I cannot stress this enough that section 5, the moment that is part of the IEP, that guides your IEP. Okay. Colleen, I'm either doing a really good job or everyone is bored.
It's definitely that you're doing a good job.
All right, well, let's move on to section 6, the goals, so I can get you guys out of here on time. All right, this first area is present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. You might have heard the word PLOP before, right? That's what that stands for, those present levels. The information is not to be copied and pasted from the child's profile. And when we are putting stuff in here, we are looking for the current academic and functional levels. So current meaning within the last year. Some other things that they might look at is some data points and some testing. Again, make sure the testing is from this past year only. We're not looking at 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We are looking just from the past year and how it impacts them. No cut and paste. Current. That goal must relate to this present level of performance. So if I am talking about a reading goal and I'm saying that reading fluency is where the student has the greatest need, when I write that goal, it better be on reading fluency, not reading comprehension. They must match up. Right. Again, current. The child's performance at the time of writing should not be more than 1 year old. All right, again, just some other things. Besides that academic achievement and functional, we're looking for provide the foundation and support for developing the goals. This is where our evidence, our baseline data should be in here. We're comparing to the same grade level and age level, and we identify students' needs and align that corresponding goal. So I wanted to kind of talk about what causes the compliance errors. These are what they have found to be the area in most that they get non-compliant. Lack of sufficient data and information. So it's either numerical and or qualitative and typical peer data. So they're lacking data and they're lacking how it relates to typical peer data. If you don't have that, you're not compliant. Data is not current or time referenced. I've seen it before. If a student is in 8th grade, I don't want to know what their 3rd grade score was. I want to know where they're currently at. The PLOP is not linked to needs or goals. Again, reading fluency, reading comprehension, that's not going to match up. If it's a reading fluency data, it's going to be a reading fluency goal. And the PLOP does not indicate how the disability has an impact in making progress in the general education curriculum. So again, we're looking at what is the problem? So what? So I always think of when I would be writing these, so what? How does this impact? And again, if they have a transition, it should be impacting them reaching their transition goals. So again, relating it back, that's why that transition is huge. Questions on any of the errors or maybe what you could do in the middle of it if this happens? I will tell you right now, if you are in the middle of an IEP, if you are the administrator in charge and you see something not matching up, I'd be very wary of closing out an IEP without that data in there. I'm not going to go through this slide as much because I'm going to go over in the next. Just think of those 6 components: who, what degree, under conditions, time, and how it will be measured. So our goal, it's a clearly defined behavior. So if we are looking at a behavior goal, if I just say behavior, what does that mean? Is it a functional behavior? Is it a organization? What is the clearly defined behavior? And we're going to look at the condition under which it will occur and the criteria used to evaluate it. So with our clearly defined, the specific action the student will be expected to perform. It has to be based on one specific skill. We as educators sometimes like to cram in a whole bunch of words in one. It has to be user-friendly. Parents have to understand this. Students have to understand this. So if we say, going back to my reading, the student will have a reading comprehension goal that is focused on answering who, what, where, when, how questions, and we'll also write a paragraph explaining it. Well, now we have 2 different things going on. We are only looking at one area, right? We're not blending. We're not going to do decoding and fluency in one. Again, clear, concise, specific. Avoid targeted math skills and targeted reading skills. The condition under which the behavior will occur. Again, this is the situation, the setting, or the giving material. Grade level material needs to be specifically defined to their ability level or their expected grade level. We have to be specific on this. Oops. All right. 3, the criteria used to evaluate. This gets us in trouble a little bit too much. Okay, if we have 80% and 4 out of 5 trial, we need both, right? This is perfect. Present level up here, 60%. Here's their baseline data. Here's their percent. Here's the number of trials. Look at my goals. 80%, 4 to 5 trials. So in your goal, you need 2 different sections. If you have percent, and how many trials. So you have to have percent and how often. If I was to just say solve the problems at 80% accuracy, well, guess what? If I'm the student or am I the parent and one time they get an 80%, oh, perfect, they reached that goal. You can't do that. It's 80% and how often that happens. So I just saw that there was a question. Sorry, what does it mean to avoid targeted reading and math goals? Targeted would be to a specific reading series. It would be a specific, when we're looking, so going back to this math one, right? We're giving subtraction problems with regrouping. So I'm not saying how many, I'm not saying with this series or in this specific assessment. And the reason being for this, right? Teachers change, curriculums change. If we go too targeted with things, it's going to be a challenge for us to reach those things. So we want to make sure that we are actually focusing on this. Our goal is to help them with a skill, not a target. The skill is how can we get them to reach, to close the gap there. Whoever asked that question, it came from an iPad. Did that kind of make more sense? Hopefully. Colleen, can you just let me know if they ask anything else? Thanks. All right. Going with those methods down there. This is the same as that transition area, I'm gonna say. If you mark too many, you're gonna have to have data for all this. You're gonna make sure that you're marking what is actually, and actually, if you are in any of the IEP areas, and I can send this, actually, I might have a link where I'll add this to the PowerPoint for you guys. If you have questions on what any of these are, ODE has clearly explained what every single one of these are and when to use them. So I will go ahead and add this link so you have it. Okay. Must be written record to support this method of data collection. All right. Any other questions? How are we doing? Good. All right. Annual goals and short-term objectives, the measurability. Just again, I know we know this, but good reminder. Accuracy, that's the number of times that behavior or skill occurs. Duration, length of time, rate, number of times within time period, and the cumulative count. Any of these work, right? But we have to make sure whatever we are putting in that block is the same as the goal. Okay. I just want to go over the difference between objectives and benchmarks. Objectives, short-term objectives are developed based on a logical breakdown of the major components of the annual. They serve as milestones, okay? They're sequential order. You need to do this before you can do this. An example, if a student must demonstrate for him to reach the annual goal to read orally at 80 to 100 words per minute with 95% accuracy, I might have Mike will identify and record unfamiliar words prior to engaging in oral reading. Then Mike will make a prediction about the topic of the passage. And then Mike will self-monitor his reading fluency and accuracy daily. So it's a build off of them. That is an objective. Benchmarks now. These are major milestones that the student will demonstrate that will lead. So again, they're still leading to the end result there. However, these are designated target time for a period. Benchmarks form expected performance levels that allow for regular check-ins. So going back to something similar with that, it might be that by November, Mike will orally read 70 to 80 words. Then in February, he's going to read 80 to 90. And then by April, he'll read 90 to 100. So this is when you see those numbers increasing. Whereas, and if I go backwards, the objectives, this is, we're kind of doing skills breakdown, and this one is increasing. Right. 4 to 3 minutes. Are there any other questions? This was a lot.
We will have this recording posted to the website.
And
And
please-
with that
Sorry.
With that said, I'm going to stop the recording in case anyone has any particular questions that you want to ask.
If anyone could not attend